Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, folks. Welcome to episode 216 of the Marketing Your Practice podcast, the podcast where I get to simplify marketing for chiropractors, help you guys reach more peeps, have more impact, more fun, make more money. In today's episode, you're in for a treat because I'm talking with one of the smartest dudes I know and a guy who I am absolutely thrilled to call one of my closest friends, Dr. Martin Harvey, a great Aussie chiropractor. And today we're really talking about how to increase your retention and how to do that through really evidence-based communication. One of the things I love about Martin is he's put the time, effort and energy to really research through the influence literature. I talk a little bit inside this episode. We're getting taught lots of things about how we should communicate with our patients in their report of findings, in their initial consultations. And a lot of it's not based on much other than the charisma of the presenter. Martin has spent the time, effort and energy to really dive, because there's a lot of research about how to get people to take steps forwards in life, whether it be wanting people to stop smoking, wanting them to behave in ways that are likely to lead to better health outcomes. And Martin understands that in the chiropractic context, unlike almost anybody as well. So in today's episode, we talk a lot about the steps that need to go into really helping people get better results with their care, particularly how to go about increasing retention as well. Fascinating conversation. I think you're going to absolutely love this one. That's enough of me talking. Let's jump in and talk to the amazing Martin Harvey. Enjoy the show.
Welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast, where we guide natural health and wellness experts through the pitfalls of marketing. Each episode, you'll learn simple, effective, easily actionable, and heart-centered marketing strategies. And here's your host, Angus Pyke.
Martin Harvey, welcome to the Marketing Your Practice podcast. How are you?
Oh, I'm excellent. Thanks for having me. I always love getting to chat to you, and even better when I get to chat to you on the podcast. We get to have share some cool ideas.
It is an unusual environment for us to talk. You know, we chat lots, but it gives me the freedom to ask questions that I might find a little bit awkward for me to kind of ask afterwards. And so I always look forward to chatting. I tell everybody when I'm talking about you that you're one of the smartest, cleanest thinkers that I know. So how many is this? This is a lot we've done together. In fact, Tony Ebel, if you're listening to this, Martin may well be getting in front of you with a number of podcast episodes.
And yeah. Can we do a couple back to back just so that I bury Tony?
Yeah, that's exactly right. The competitive nature of him, I'll expect an email from him moments after this trying to book another episode again to get back into it. So, hey, I've got lots of great stuff that I want to chat with you about today. We've got a bunch of new listeners that might not have been here last time that we were listening. Can you just give them a thumbnail of who you are, where you work, where you're from? And then we're going to just talk a lot about communication today, something that you have a level of genius around. So
Thank you. Yeah, so I'm a chiropractor. I practice full-time practice in South Melbourne in Australia. And I've been in this area now for, I think this is my 30th year of practice, which is a sobering thought. Along the way, I have done some other things in chiropractic. I've been president of the Spinal Research Foundation. I've been on other boards. I've also had a really big interest in how we can better communicate the value of chiropractic, and there's sort of a whole journey there, which I think we've shared previously. So I want to go down another path with that. But along the way, I guess because I was excited about the potential that chiropractic had to help so many people, I was looking for what's the best way of communicating it. And so I listened to people within the chiropractic community, and a lot of it was, you've got to tell the story sort of stuff, which kind of works and kind of doesn't. And then I was really fortunate to come across some research and literature from outside of chiropractic, which broadly we call the influence literature, which is pretty simply just research that's done to better understand why people do what they do and what we can do to ethically and effectively help them make better decisions. So that's the influence literature. So started off in psychology, but it's then grown from there. There's a lot of behavioural scientists, there's a lot of behavioural economists, there's a lot of marketing research, there's a lot of neuroscience research. Wrap it all up, that's the stuff that I'm interested in. And then probably over now almost 20 years, I've been looking at how you apply that within a chiropractic context, and then sharing it with chiropractors around the world in terms of one-on-one seminars and online seminars and all those sort of things. So I guess that's the quick run through of it.
You bring a really lovely perspective, because so much of what chiropractors are doing in practice, a lot of it comes from somebody just delivering a message up on stage with a bucket load of charisma. And so therefore, if it's delivered with charisma, that's right. And I should do the same thing in my practice. And it reminds me of that old story of, the person that every time they go to cook their roast lamb, they cut the lamb in half and kind of fold it in half there too. And, the partner says to him, why do you do it that way? So, well, my mum's already done that way. Gets on the phone, calls her mum, why do you always cut the lamb in half when you do it that way? She said, I don't know, my mother always used to do it that way. Rings the mother and says, why do you always cut the lamb in half? She said, because we had a really small oven and I needed to cut it in half for it to fit in there. And I know for me in the early days, before I had a level of as my self-confidence as a chiropractor was growing, if something was said with enough confidence and certainty from the stage, or in in those days, a tape or a CD I was listening to, I was up. What I really love and what is unique, I don't know anybody else that's done what you have done and put the body of information together that says, we're evidence-based in the way that we want to be caring for our patients as well. I wonder if we could let's look at what the evidence tells us about the best way to communicate. And that's what I think so many people find so damn attractive about the message that you share. What I'm interested to chat about today is this concept you were talking about beforehand, is the dangers of the shortcut, or the hack, so to speak. Tell me more about that.
So I guess what I've observed is, and I can understand the attraction to it. Like, quick results sound super enticing. The shortcut, the hack, and what I guess become increasingly aware of over the last couple of years is that works in some circumstances, but for most things, it's bullshit. Like, I call it the fallacy of the fast, that it's a little bit like people who come to see us for wanting help with some sort of health challenge. The bottom line is, for things to be sustainable, for actual real health changes, that requires doing things consistently over a period of time, and people wanting fast relief, that to me is never a good long-term strategy. And I've seen essentially the parallel of that, where I've had chiropractors coming to me wanting help with their practice and being frustrated with the results that they're getting. And then when I look at what they've been doing, they've been bouncing from some quick hack of, this will double your practice in 60 days. This will get you 10 new patients next week. This will do this. And I understand the attraction that a quick solution seems more attractive, but I sort of think that we're applying an outside-in approach to developing our practices, and then not seeing the contradiction there. So I guess go on.
No. The contradiction is huge, because it's the exact opposite of what we're telling our patients. We all bitch and whinge about, man, somebody coming in wanting a quick fix. Why can I not be okay? But then they'll leap back to me and go, look, I need some newies next week, Angus. What can I do?
Or people will come to me from a communication perspective and say, what do I need to say to people to stop them dropping out of care after 3 weeks? Or what do I need to say to people so that they commit to a program of care? And there isn't one answer to that. You actually need a more holistic perspective on what you're trying to do. And the same thing, you can get predictable results in your health if you follow a program of care and behavior change that supports that. But yes, change is possible, and people within their practices can get the improvement that they want in whatever dimension, and there are principles that can guide us. And I think from a communication perspective, the influence literature is a really good application of principles. And the truth of it is, you're going to have to be a bit patient.
I think there's a nice growing skepticism that's starting to develop in around the hack and the shortcut too. I'm studying, I've talked about, I'm studying some life coaching at the moment. One of the modules that we were doing recently was in around weight loss. And my teacher was saying that when she starts off a conversation in around people, one of the things that she will say to them is, this is going to take 2 years. And she deals with like big weight loss, at least 50 pounds or more, and many people over 100 pounds. And she said, I want you, like, how would you feel right now if I guaranteed you that you will have lost that 100 pounds in 2 years? And for most people, there's that sense of, like, it's actually not it's not a turn off. It's none of those kind of things. It gives reasonable expectations. And I think the same kind of thing could be said with our patients. And just before getting on this call, I was, in a coaching group with a bunch of other chiropractors. And I said to them, look, you got to get your first 30 videos out of the way. Like it's going to take time, and don't expect to be great next week or even next month. But I can promise you this, if you do this over the next year, you'll be really good. And so I'm quite amazed at how the sense of relief that actually brings about for people there too might be the opposite of me saying, here's how to make fabulous videos in the next 30 days or your money back.
No, it's good. I think there are a lot of people who at the same time, like, to me, my theory on it is that we've had this sort of cultural trend towards hacks and shortcuts and those sort of things that is ill-fitting to a chiropractic view of the world. But we're also part of a broader culture, and we've sort of lent into them within chiropractic because it is so attractive. We're wired for that instant gratification. However, I think we've got an advantage as chiropractors that we've got this overarching philosophy of life that allows us to perhaps be skeptical early. But yeah, I think from a communication perspective, we're constantly talking to people about the benefits of delayed gratification. But sometimes there's a bit of a blind spot in terms of applying it to ourselves. And so a lot of what I'm wanting to talk about and what I'm trying to do from a communication perspective is more or less the same thing as what you're saying is, look, if you want to have a phenomenal practice that's set up to really serve people at a high level and to be self-generating in terms of growing its impact, it's not going to happen in 30 days. So it's going to take a couple of years of focused work. However, if you follow certain principles, you can get there.
Yeah. You've got a bunch of seminars that you're travel allowing, heading around, certainly around Australia here over the next little while there too. The title of which is kind of Improving Patient Care Through Communication. Let's talk about that. What are you going to be teaching there? What are the key kind of concepts? One of the things that you talked about before we got on here too is I really want to get into this idea of not only is this better for, communication is not just a soft skill. It has, and the research shows it has very hard outcomes in terms of improving patient outcome as well. I'd love to learn more about that.
Yeah, so I think there's also been a bit of a false dichotomy within chiropractic that says if you're working on your marketing, your communication, that the only reason that you would do that is for almost selfish reasons because you want to be developing your practice more and growing your practice more. And a big part of what I want to lead into with this is to make people aware of the research that shows it's almost an ethical obligation to be a better communicator because there is existing research within the broader health research field that shows that when health practitioners are taken for a program of improving their communication skills, particularly in a style of communication which is built on engagement rather than us telling people things, and we can come back and talk more about that in a minute. But what it shows is that there are the soft outcomes, the indirect outcomes, where people feel seen and they feel acknowledged, and there's this sort of warm, fuzzy feel. And there's also very hard, measurable improvement in outcomes of care and then getting the appropriate care and then getting a correct diagnosis or assessment so that the care is matched to what's going on for them. All of those things are improved when you as a chiropractor or you as a health practitioner work on your communication skills. So I look at working on your communication skills as almost this point of leverage where you get a whole lot of better outcomes, a whole lot of improvements just through working on one set of skills. It serves the people that you're serving. They get better, they feel better about seeing you, and they get better results. yes, if you communicate better, one of the better outcomes is people are more likely to follow through with their self-care. They're more likely to follow through with the program of care that you recommend. And through that, you're going to get a practice that grows more referrals, plus people staying around longer is automatically a way of growing your practice. And it's less stressful because people are getting results. They're wanting to be there. They understand why you're doing the things you're doing and why they need to do their part of the deal as well. So to me, communication skills is this point where if you focus on developing those skills, particularly the high impact skills that are mapped out in the influence literature, then everybody wins. So really important area to work on. And it's not a selfish thing. It's not about you serving you. It's about you serving other people.
One of the things that you kind of introduced me to is the acronym called WHOOP, and the dangers of perhaps communicating kind of over positively as well. Can you kind of outline that and see some of the mistakes that you might see us making as practitioners and how ultimately that would affect our retention?
Definitely. So if I can sort of go back, like take the long way around, if we look at influence, there's a lot of different models that we can use in applying it. And one of the ones that I really like is a model that Cialdini talks about, where he talks about essentially what we need to do is take people through a series of different communication strategies that match their psychology. So first of all, we've got to build a relationship with people. And then once we've built a relationship, then we've got to reduce uncertainty. That I think that particularly when people are trying something new or they're spending time, money, energy, whatever else, there's a natural skepticism there that we've got to create a sense of certainty for them. And then that third phase, we've got to motivate action. And so often in wanting hacks and shortcuts as chiropractors, we're jumping straight to wanting, what do I have to say to somebody? What do I have to do to make them want to do something? Well, the true answer is you've got to take the slow road of building a relationship first. And that can be done very quickly. And we can talk about a couple of ways that you can do that don't take ages, and then reduce uncertainty and then motivate action. And then even within that motivating action thing, that's where WHOOP sits into the framework. Now, WHOOP is an acronym that a psychologist called Gabrielle Oettingen has come up with. Gabrielle, in the pre-chat, I forever call her Barbara Oettingen. I have no idea why. And then I think, what did you call her when I was talking about it?
Deborah. I jumped in with Deborah somehow from it. So
Gabrielle Oettingen she's an academic psychologist. So again, it's literature based, and she's got her WHOOP. It stands for Wish, Outcome, Obstacle, Plan. Well, I'll come back and sort of flesh out what that says, but the best way, if you really want to dive deep into this, is there's a book called Rethinking Positive Thinking that she's written. And essentially what it says is that when we focus, yes, there's value in if you have the wish part of it, and spending some time visualizing and mapping out in rich terms what that would be as an outcome, so that you know that you've got it and you've got a really tangible, clear, engaging vision of what the future would be. However, there's a real downside to that. Now, I can talk about it either in terms of you wanting to achieve a goal, but for our purposes, I'm going to talk about a lot of what we do from a communication perspective, where we're wanting to motivate action, is to talk about people about this positive future that they could have. So if we think of it in a really perhaps commonplace situation, if somebody were coming to see you and they had low back pain that was stopping them from being able to play golf, then we could motivate them towards action by asking them some questions about that. How are you feeling about that? What's the, what would you like the future to be? Look, I'd love to be able to be back playing golf, to be able to do a full round of 18 holes and do that 2 days in a row and feel great and energetic and fluid. All right. that's doing the wish and the outcome part of it, which you can see the logic as to why that would motivate action, because it's this clear, compelling future. What Gabrielle Oettingen points out, though, is that often when we get people focusing just on that positive outcome, they're actually less motivated to do the things they need to do, because from a neurochemical perspective, that picturing of this imagined future gives you a lot of the rewards that you would get for having it. You're in this nice cozy jacuzzi because you've already got a lot of the positive feelings that you have. It's just going to happen. I can visualize that it's going to happen. So there's a downside for us in achieving things where we just contemplate the positive part of it. And there's a downside for us in terms of retention. If we focus too much just on the positive part, it's going to be fabulous when you're back playing golf. I can't wait to see you back on the golf course. And then we're surprised that they seem so motivated. Why have they stopped coming in, or why are they coming in once a week when they should be twice a week? Why aren't they doing any of the exercises that would support their progress? Well, quite likely it's because we just focused on the positive.
And so insight, and I guess that is often because I first heard of some of this stuff with any kind of goal setting, that when we have that goal setting, whether it either be kind of really visualizing the outcome that we want to get there. And the idea, just to, if I'm right in clarifying that too, is that neurochemically, I get that kind of, my brain feels all juiced up. It's great. It's as if I've already done it. And so therefore, why do I need to kind of do it there too?
Yeah,
and
so you get all that sort of dopamine of achievement for free, but for not having actually done anything. And unfortunately, that feeling of those positive neurochemical emotions, you then you actually need to feel a little bit of, oh shit, I'm not sure whether this is going to happen, to motivate you to do the things that you need to do. Yeah. So the way that so that we've done the W and the O of loop. Yes. The next O is obstacles. So thinking in advance of what might get in the way. Yep. And so the way that I've been applying it in chiropractic practice, and I've now coached some chiropractors through it, is to proactively bring up the things that most commonly get in people's way from them getting the results for care that they should. So we might say, in that same scenario that we were mapping out, let's say you were the person who was being stopped from playing golf. I'd say, so listen, Angus, I'm really excited. It's great that you're excited to undertake the program. I want to just push pause for a minute and talk about two of the things that most commonly stop people from getting the results that I've just spoken about, so that we can make a plan to not interact and not have them derail things. Is that fair enough?
Yes, please.
Okay. And quite simply, they are that people get busy, other things come up, and they miss an appointment. And then once you miss an appointment, it's sort of easy to get out of the pattern and the habit. And all of a sudden, rather than coming in twice a week or 3 times a week or whatever we've recommended, I'm seeing you once a week or once every 2 weeks, and you lose momentum, and we're not getting the results. Does that make sense?
Totally.
The second obstacle is that people start feeling better. So they start, oh, look, it's not as bad as it was. And so it's less of a focus. They're either, again, not coming as regularly as they need to, or they're not doing exercises that we've mapped out that you need to do to support the change. And again, we kind of lose that momentum and you don't get the results. So what I'd like to do is to talk through a plan for if things get busy, and a plan for if you're starting to feel better, what we need to do, what you need to remind yourself to keep on track. So then we can just very easily say, look, the key thing, if you do, look, life's going to get in the way at some stage for most people. Something's going to come up. The key thing is that we don't miss 2 appointments in a row, or if we miss an appointment, we make it up within 48 hours. Or, if we have to reschedule, we reschedule to the same day or the next day, so that we're keeping that momentum. And we just have those agreements in advance. And what the psychology research shows is where we have this if-then plan, they're highly what's called contextual. So if you map out that context for people, and you engage the idea of Cialdini's idea of commitment and consistency, which is we're highly likely to motivate to behave rather in ways that we've already committed to behaving in advance. So
Yes.
really powerful, but quite simple conversation to have, but balances out. We can get the benefit of having people motivated and excited and engaged by the positive without that downside of it if we just add that extra step of contemplating the obstacles and making a plan for them.
And what's the if-then plan for you start to feel great faster than expected, and so therefore start to step back from your visits? How do you frame that?
Okay, so it links into some communication strategies that we would have built in earlier, but we essentially say, so what I'm going to suggest you do is when you start feeling good, you need to just remind yourself that this program of care is not only about feeling good, it's about dealing with the underlying imbalance so that we can not only get back to golf, we can minimize the chance of the same problem coming back. Does that make sense? So if you start to feel better, I want you to just remind yourself that it's important, and you've explained that you want to deal not only with the pain part of the problem, we want to deal with the underlying imbalance as well.
Got it. And in there, I'm imagining that some of those kind of just micro commitments, checking in with me, does that make sense? That kind of stuff. That's that you were talking about Cialdini's kind of commitment going forwards, that I'm engaged in the process, that it's not you just talking at me or to me, it's talking with me and getting that. And so in essence, are these conversations reporter findings, or are they even starting to happen in the initial consultation as well? And then I got to imagine, are they then reminded again throughout care?
Yes. So yes to all of the above. So that specific discussion of the obstacles, I tend to schedule into a report of the structure of a report of findings.
Yep.
And it's a thing that you can keep going back to discuss. So if you've had that discussion in a report of findings, then when we start to get people, when people are reporting, oh, it's great, I'm starting to feel so much better, then you can, I like the idea of that outcome obstacle discussion happening at the same time. Let's not overemphasize the positive. You can celebrate. You can go, that is awesome. And just a reminder that we need to just, that can be a point where we lose momentum. So we just need to make sure that we stick with the program. It's still got this to go, and then we're going to remeasure at this point. That's awesome that you're feeling good.
Yeah. I've always found in practice, if I can, I call it pre-framing, and maybe it's another way. If I can tell somebody in advance about something that's likely to happen down the track, that when I bring it up, when it happens down the track, it's like, oh yeah, it's of course, there's no surprises in there, and also, I like that, because too often in this situation, when somebody says, I'm feeling fantastic, the first thing I hear some chiropractors doing, oh, don't let that stand in the way. Remember what we said, congratulate first. Fabulous that you're feeling great. And remember that this is one of the things that can sometimes stand in the way of what your original health goals were, which was not only to kind of get you back to golf, but to prevent this from happening again there too. But high five, thrilled that things are feeling great. We need to continue with our current schedule as planned until our review in a couple of weeks' time. Is that kind of how it might go?
Yeah. Exactly. That's exactly how it would go.
Yeah.
And it is, if I can just loop into a couple of things that we've spoken about, we were talking about the discussion, the engagement of asking permission and getting their commitment and consistency, but it's very much them-centered. This is part of what we're talking about, that if we look at the communication skills that you need to have to get improved outcomes, to be practicing in a patient-centered way, to be practicing in an evidence-based way, that they are built on engagement, where we're not just telling people and then assuming that they're going to do that. It's a conversation that we're having where we're checking in with them. We're saying, does that work? Is it okay? Do I have your permission to do this?
Yes.
And that's kind of the key in the difference between the two paradigms of communication, that tell the story approach and a more contemporary evidence-based approach.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some of the research that I have read in around why people leave their healthcare practitioner, the most significant reason was not that they weren't getting results. It was some kind of relationship thing where there was a lack of connection in some way there. And I think, when we watched the 1950s style of medical show where the health practitioner was, right up there next to God and, just do, and to some extent, we still see that with some of the shows like ER and things like that now that are on there too. When in actual fact, it would appear that what the research is saying is that most of our community are looking for some kind of partnership, as opposed to a dictatorship as well. And I can see how nicely. So just to get some clarity, I've given my recommendations. I've checked in with what they want to go. We've set a plan of attack. And it would be there I could just roll in and say, look, excited to be going forwards. Look, before we get started, I just want to bring up, there are often two things that can get in the way of us getting these outcomes. Is it okay if we take a moment and discuss those, put a plan in place so we can do the very best that we can get the outcome that you want to get? That would be a kind of segue that would lead us into it.
That's exactly the sequence.
Yes.
And just to, emphasize one of the things that you were talking about in terms of the benefit of this, my understanding of that research about why people stop is that 68% of people stop having care because of a group of things that are broadly perceived indifference. And so it's that sense of, I don't think you really care about me as a person or me as an individual. And so engagement and connection is the solution to that. And I think your example of the 1950s doctor is a really important thing for us to contemplate as chiropractors, because we can almost sort of say, oh, that's not us because we're not the medical profession. We've always been very touchy-feely. The truth is that a lot of the procedures that we're using were generated in the 1950s, originally by Pyke, and then, they fed out from there. And they made a lot of sense in the 1950s, which is pre the information age. Like if you think back, I'm not sure whether you're old enough, but I remember if you wanted to get information about a healthcare issue, it was really hard. Like you had to go to the library and hope that the right book was there, or the journal article, or, information was on a microfiche. So this, us being the kind of distributor of knowledge, and if you come to me, I'm the expert and I'll tell you what to do, made sense in an environment where it was difficult to get information. And now we've essentially flipped that, where people have access to all of human knowledge via something that they carry around with them the whole time. And so if we're still using approaches from the pre-information age of telling people information and do it my way, or else, why are you wasting my time as an expert? We're very much using, an old technology, whereas what we actually need to be doing is engaging with people through these approaches that are really built on a recognition that people have the fundamental right to make decisions for themselves.
The model that, let's call it the old model, was one that I certainly was the first 10 years of my practice. And it led towards what would have eventually been a burnout in me, because I felt so much damn pressure, responsibility for everything. It was all on the top of my shoulders about what would happen and whether somebody would start care and convert into care, and did they continue to come back, and if they dropped out, it was always my fault. And I felt like my vision for myself was I was either the angry school teacher, or I was everyone's dad, trying to tell them what to do and how to go about, and neither of which I liked. I didn't, at that stage, and still now, I have enough difficulties making decisions for my own life about what to eat, when to eat it, how to manage my exercise, my family, all those kind of things. I didn't feel like I wanted to make the decision for other people's lives. And so when I transitioned my practice into a partnership, where ultimately I said, what do you want, Martin? Here's how I can help you get there. And if you wanted to change the rules a little bit with that too, then I could just say, listen, that's going to give us a slightly different outcome. And are you okay with that? And if you were, I'm like, fuck yeah, man, let's go for it then. Like this is, it's okay. If you're going to change the rules a little bit, we change the outcome, but let's see what happens. And I was totally okay with that. I see this so freeing, and I love that. I can see already where I can kind of go into obstacle and plan And it's
Yeah.
just so nice. And as a partner, here's what might come up. Here's what we do if that situation comes up. How does that work for you? And then, when the time comes that I can see how that conversation just goes in there nicely. Where if that whoop goes badly, or if people tend to miss parts of it or get confused with it, where does that often happen?
So I think what people are generally pretty good at identifying a wish.
Yes.
I think that chiropractors, as a rule, then aren't great at necessarily turning that into an outcome. And so,
Yes.
say within the teaching that I'll do, I'll teach people a lot of unpacking questions, which are essentially getting people to turn what's going on for them into something that's richer and more engaging. So an example of an unpacking question would be people who have a health challenge, in general, as part of the coping mechanism, will tend to minimize the impact of it. They'll tell themselves a story which helps in the short term in terms of coping, but does tend to distort their perspective of what the true size of the problem is. So the first mistake that I see people making is not slowing. We look at it as purely just a clinical encounter of, so what's bringing you in here today? I've got some back pain. All right, tell me about the pain. It's an ache here, it's a throb here, it started then, it went then. You got any change in bowel or bladder function? We ask all these very clinical questions. I think the first mistake is not taking the time to unpack what the real impact of that, recognizing that psychologically most people are going to have minimized it. So we need to spend some time. It's probably beyond the scope of today to go into what a whole lot of them would be, but a couple of really simple examples would be, if people are minimizing it, they're going to be thinking about, it's not so bad once I get up and I take a Panadol and I do my stretches and I put the heat lamp on it and I do this and then I can sort of cope. If you ask people a question of, well, tell me, Angus, I understand it varies. What's it like when it's at its absolute worst? So you remove that distortion for a moment and get them to do the opposite of focusing on what it's like at its worst. A second question would be, so often the pain's part of the issue for people, but more commonly my experience is that the big issue is what the pain's stopping you from doing or making it harder for you to do. So that's an example of unpacking questions. There's a whole sequence of them that I run through in my programs, but that's the key to really getting it from just a wish to an outcome.
Yes.
Then the other mistake, and I've been very guilty of that because I was engaged with that idea of, well, what we've got to do to get people motivated to action is to do the outcome part of that sequence, is doing the obstacle part, which is the bit that we have spoken about. So I feel like we've kind of fleshed out what the solution to that mistake is. The last part of it where I've seen people make a mistake in applying it is to just point out what the obstacles are without then having the if-then plan.
Yes.
The in emergency, do this.
Yes.
If we map that out in advance, if we say, look, what I would suggest as a plan is X, Y, Z, then once that context is triggered, they go, yeah, if this happens, I know I need to do that. So we want to have that suggestion. And then the final mistake that people make is they might give that suggestion, but they don't ask people to verbally agree to it. Because the truth of commitment is or consistency is only evoked when the other person says yes to it. So this goes back to that classic old Cialdini experiment around consistency, where he was able to reduce the number of no-shows at a restaurant by getting people to. So the old model would be, you ring up, want to make a restaurant reservation. I say, all right, Angus, I've got you for a party of 2 at 7 o'clock. If things change and you can't make it, please give us a call. We'll see you tomorrow at 7 o'clock.
Yes.
The amount of consistency that I've evoked with that is 0, because you haven't said anything. Whereas if I just tweak that, I can have around a 30% reduction in my no-shows by getting you to commit to it. And it's just as simple as, so if things change and you can't make it, will you please give us a call? And then I wait for you to say,
absolutely.
Yeah, and once you say yes, we've got consistency. So if we put that in our if-then plan, so what I'd suggest, Angus, is if you've got one of those busy weeks where things are going crazy, and you can't make one of your times, I'm going to suggest that you make it up within 24 hours so that we just keep that repetition going. Is that fair enough? Is that something you feel like you can do?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, okay. And the second scenario is that thing of feeling like you're feeling better, and so the problem's solved, even though we know that there's the underlying imbalance that's going to be there even once you're feeling better, that we need to work past that point. So if you're starting to feel better and you're thinking, oh, look, I can reduce the intensity, I just want you to remind yourself that what you've said you want to do is deal with the underlying problems so that we minimize the chance of the problem coming back so that we can keep things on track. Is that something you're happy to remind yourself at that point?
Yeah, that makes total sense. Yes.
Yeah.
Got it.
So,
and it also, it's less, when you bring up these things in advance, it's less likely to feel like, oh, Martin just wants me to come back for more visits. All of those things get out of the way because you've brought it up in advance before even things begun. You've told them it's so simple and powerful. And I can see just how wonderful this is on so many kind of levels there, to add this component into it and then kind of keep that consistently kind of flowing through. So
yeah.
I love it, buddy. Now you have a podcast that you have started to, and our listeners, if you guys are loving this stuff and want to kind of learn more about longer form of this stuff, tell us about the podcast. What sort of things will you be discussing on there? Where can they find it?
Okay. So first of all, I kind of want to acknowledge you in terms of my podcast, in that what really made me decide that I wanted to do one was your podcast. I'm a big fan of podcasts, and I found while I was percolating these ideas around the fallacy of fast, listening to your podcast, I'd find I'd get so much out of it, because a podcast is a much better medium to me to really explore an idea in some depth and give people not just like a little snappy bit in 5 or 10 minutes, but to explore something in the amount of time that it needs to really flesh out an idea. So I guess that's kind of the genesis of it, was really listening to yours. And the idea of it is, no, thank you, is that I really want to be able to share some of these ideas with chiropractors. And also, so the first couple of episodes of it are me exploring ideas that are top of mind. So some of the concepts that we've discussed, and I'm just walking through my perspective on it. The plan for it really is it's called Under the Influence, and the reference there is the play on words of a lot of I am under the influence of coffee, I'm under the influence of good red wine, and I really think that it plays on that idea of the influence literature being something that I really want to champion and bring to chiropractic. Because the frustration for me is, with chiropractic, we've got this real paradox of having this phenomenal product that can really help people live much better, happier, healthier, more active lives. And people, once they experience it, we have really high levels of satisfaction, but we have this really weird image and reputation in our communities, and a lot of that can be resolved through really good communication, and really good communication is defined by the influence literature. So really the idea of the podcast is that it's going to be about how we can apply these ideas in practice. And some of that will be me talking, some of that will be me having conversations with other people who are doing similar things in practice. But the end goal of it really is, I just want to help people more, get those better outcomes, and to help more people to be able to get out and impact more people in their community and grow their practice, grow their impact, and have more fun in practice.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. It's queued up in my listening queue. You and I are both podcast geeks, and we love this stuff as well. There's no doubt that as a profession, chiropractors, we know that medicine has gone out of their way to discredit us. And that's one of the reasons that we have some challenges in our community. But a whole lot of the other reason is that we do a lot of dumb, stupid things. Like we hold on to outdated models. We've played the victim for long enough. We can move forwards, and we've got a wonderful product, as you said there too, and some clean and crisp communication would be a great thing also. If a lot of our listeners are Aussie based, the seminars that you have coming up too, in terms of if you're able to travel for those, to improving the patient care through communication, how do peeps find out about that as well?
So it's run in partnership with the ACA, the Australian Chiropractors Association. So you can register through them, or if you want to go to my website, insideoutpractices.com, the dates will be up on the live workshops tab. So first one is 31st of July in Launceston, and then every few weeks I'm going to Adelaide, then Sydney, Brisbane, Melbourne, and at the end of the year, November, wrapping it up in Perth. So yeah, really looking forward to actually getting, because I think to me that's part of the other thing, is that online programs are awesome, and there's something that you can't capture, that there's something about just being in front of people that I think is super exciting as well. So yeah, really looking forward to it.
Yeah, well, I'm encouraged, and I will be going out of my way to come along to one of them too. Hey, buddy, what a pleasure again. I always learn something from you. I was a little bit aware of kind of the end result. I'm going to continue to call her Deborah, of her work, just to confuse the listeners there as well. But having that whoop laid out like that, that's practical. Tuesday morning when I'm in practice, that has now become part of my report of findings, and it'll be part of the conversation that I'll be kind of just tacking in now to clean that up with a bunch of my patients there as well. Thanks for putting all the time and effort into learning this stuff there too, as well. Any final thoughts?
No, I guess thank you for the opportunity to have a chat again. I always feel like I learn a heap every time we get together, and also just help me sort of clarify how I'm communicating the ideas that I think are really important, as well as it's a great chance to share these ideas with your audience. So thanks, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, gang. Hey, check out Under the Influence. I'll make sure I have a link to the podcast, and I'll have a link to where you can find out more about the seminar in the show notes. Dude, I'll catch up with you in person real soon, and we'll continue from there. Have a good arvo.
Thanks, mate. You too.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you have to come and check out the Community Influencer Program. It's my monthly coaching program where we take all this material and I'll work one-on-one with you to apply, implement, systematize, and help guide you and your practice to the next level. Now you can join me on over at adiomedia.com/join. That's adiomedia.com/join. I'd love to see you in there.